The letter arrived at the lodging-house before dawn. The landlady would later say she had never seen a man return from the night in such a state, doubled at the door, unable to stand. By morning he was insensible. By the following afternoon he was dead. In the pocket of his coat, still folded, lay a letter in a woman's hand. What happened in the gaslit streets of Glasgow in the spring of 1857? Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you are watching from and what time it is there. Your support truly helps us bring you more stories like this one. Now, let us begin. It was the 22nd of March, 1857, in the city of Glasgow, Scotland. A cold, damp spring had settled over the stone streets of Blithswood Hill, and the smell of coal smoke from 1,000 evening fires drifted low across the squares and closes of the wealthier districts. At number 7 Blithswood Square, the Smith family had recently returned from their country house near Helensburgh, and the household had resumed its quiet and orderly rhythm, the servants drawing curtains, the fires being laid, the supper things cleared away before 9. Madeline Hamilton Smith was 21 years old that spring. She was the eldest daughter of James Smith, a successful Glasgow architect of considerable standing, and she had been raised, as daughters of such families were, to move with ease through the correct drawing rooms and to know instinctively the difference between what was said and what was meant. She had been educated at Mrs. Alan Gordon's Academy for Young Ladies, where she had learned the piano, the art of conversation, and the proper management of appearances. She was, by every outward measure, a young woman of impeccable standing, when what lay beneath that surface had been accumulating for nearly 2 years. Pierre-Émile Langelier had come to Glasgow by a long road. He had been born in April of 1823 in the Channel Islands, the eldest of 5 children, to French parents whose seed merchant business was confined largely to French-speaking trade. His father, recognizing the limitation, sent Émile in his early manhood to serve as an apprentice with an English-speaking firm, and there the young man had acquired the language fluently, and with an air of refinement that would, in time, cause him to be received in company rather above his natural station. He had come to Edinburgh in the early 1840s, at the invitation of a Scottish landowner, and from Edinburgh drifted westward to Glasgow, where he took employment as a warehouse clerk. It was not a position of consequence. He earned a modest wage and lodged in a rented room. This and his acquaintance with the professional families of the city extended no further than chance encounters in the street. It was in the early months of 1855 that Émile Langelier first saw Madeline Smith. She was walking with her family near the shops along Sauchiehall Street. He inquired of a mutual acquaintance for an introduction, and the introduction was made. She was 19. He was 31. She was the daughter of one of Glasgow's foremost architects. He was a clerk. While neither of these facts appeared to diminish the attraction that was, almost immediately, evident on both sides. Letters began to pass between them. At first they were cautious, formal, the letters of 2 people who understood that the correspondence itself was irregular. But as weeks became months, the letters grew longer, and warmer, and less careful in their language. They met sometimes in the street, or at nearby shops, in those brief and public encounters that could be excused as coincidence. When Madeline's father heard of the friendship and demanded it cease, Émile did not cease. Madeline told him the friendship was ended, and continued it. A friend of theirs, a Miss Mary Perry, allowed them to meet secretly at her house, and there the relationship deepened beyond anything the letters had yet recorded. By the autumn of 1856 they had, in secret, become engaged. It was in September of 1856 that William Minnock first came to occupy a visible place in Madeline's life. He was a wealthy merchant, a neighbour of the Smith family, and a man whose position in Glasgow society made him precisely the kind of husband her father had in mind. He was invited to stay at the Smith summer house on the Clyde, and he spent much time in Madeline's company. He was not disagreeable to her. He was respectable, established, and capable of providing a life that a warehouse clerk could never offer. By January of 1857, Madeline and William Minnock were officially engaged. Émile Langelier did not yet know this. Madeline wrote to him shortly after, informing him that her feelings had changed, and that she would not visit him any more. She asked that he return every letter she had ever sent him. She offered, through her housemaid to return his in exchange. He did not comply. A second letter followed, more urgent in its appeal. Emile replied that he had heard rumours of her engagement to another man. She denied it. He denied her the letters still. A third letter, and then a fourth, begged him not to expose their correspondence to her father, as the shame would be considerable. In one of them she asked him to meet her again, secretly at night, as they had met before. It was now February of 1857. On the evening of the 19th, Emile attended supper at Miss Perry's house. He told her he had plans to see Madeline that very night. What transpired at that meeting, if it took place, was never established in any court. What is known is that later that same evening, Emile Langelier returned to his lodgings suffering from severe abdominal cramps. He recovered by the following morning. On Saturday the 21st, Madeline visited a chemist on Sauchy Hall Street and purchased a small quantity of arsenic. She signed the poison register. She stated that the arsenic was required to kill rats. The chemist dispensed it accordingly. It had been coloured with soot, as was the practice, to distinguish it from food substances. Nothing more was thought of it. On the 4th of March, 1857, Madeline made a second purchase of arsenic from a chemist in the city. The entry was duly recorded. On the 18th of March, one day after the Smith family returned from a period of travel, she made a third purchase, and the quantity was larger than the first. On the night of the 22nd of March, Emile Langelier returned unexpectedly from a brief holiday in Bridge of Allan, some 30 miles north of Glasgow. He told his landlady, a Mrs. Anne Jenkins of Franklin Place, that he had received a letter calling him back. He asked her for the key to the front door, as he expected to return late. He did not say where he was going. He left his lodgings that evening, alone, and the night swallowed him entirely. After midnight, in the early hours of the 23rd, Mrs. Jenkins was woken by a commotion at the door. She found Emile on the step, bent double, his face white and drawn, quite unable to stand without support. She assisted him inside. He was suffering extreme cramps in the stomach and considerable weakness in the limbs. A physician was summoned. The physician attended and prescribed as he thought the case required. Emile Langelier died at approximately 11:30 that morning, and the physician, uncertain of the cause and unwilling to certify without further examination, declined to issue a death certificate. The matter was referred to a colleague, and the body was retained. Emile's lodgings at Franklin Place were examined by the authorities that afternoon. His desk, his shelves, and the small trunk beneath his bed were searched. Sealed within bundles of correspondence were upward of 60 letters written in a woman's hand, all signed with the initial M. Also found, and sealed into his coat pocket, was the most recent letter, the one, it was said, that had called him back from Bridge of Allan. That letter, too, was in the same hand. The letters were catalogued. The contents were read. By the following day the name of Madeline Smith was known to every officer involved in the investigation. The post-mortem examination was conducted on the 25th of March, 1857, by Dr. Frederick Penny, Professor of Chemistry at the Andersonian University of Glasgow, and Dr. Hugh Thompson, physician. The examiners found the body to be in a condition consistent with poisoning by a metallic irritant. The stomach and intestinal lining showed signs of severe acute irritation. Samples of the stomach contents and organs were removed and sealed for chemical analysis. On examination, Dr. Penny identified the presence of arsenic throughout the stomach and lower organs in a quantity which he estimated at between 82 and 87 grains. The usual fatal dose of arsenic was considered at that time to be between 2 and 3 grains. The amount found in the body of Emile Langelier was, in Dr. Penny's considered opinion, irreconcilable with accidental ingestion. It was far beyond any quantity that could be attributed to the then common practice of arsenic consumption as a cosmetic or tonic. The findings were formally recorded and forwarded to the Procurator Fiscal. Investigators cross-referenced the chemical report against the poison register entries at 2 separate Glasgow chemists, and confirmed that Madeline Smith had signed for quantities of arsenic on 3 separate occasions: the 21st of February, the 4th of March, and the 18th of March, the last purchase having been made the day before the events of the 22nd. The letter found in Emile's pocket was identified as being in Madeline's hand, by multiple witnesses who had seen her previous correspondence. The content of the letter asked him to come to her. It was the letter that had brought him back from Bridge of Allen. Reports were sealed and forwarded to the authorities. A warrant was prepared. If you are finding this case as compelling as we are, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. It truly helps us continue researching and sharing these forgotten stories from history. We also read every comment, so let us know your thoughts on this case below. Now, let us continue. On the 31st of March, 1857, Madeline Hamilton Smith was arrested at the family home at Blitheswood Square. She was composed. She gave a lengthy statement to the authorities in which she confirmed that she had last seen Émile Langelier 3 weeks before his death. She did not deny the letters, the meetings, the purchases of arsenic, nor the secret engagement. She stated that she had mixed the arsenic with water and applied it to her face and arms, a cosmetic practice, she said, that she had learned at school. She had never given it to him, though she was remanded to custody pending trial. The trial of Madeline Hamilton Smith opened at the High Court of Justiciary in Edinburgh on the 30th of June 1857 before the Lord Justice Clerk, the Right Honourable John Hope. The proceedings had been transferred from Glasgow to the capital due to the scale of public attention the case had by then attracted. The courtroom was full before the doors opened each morning, and crowds gathered nightly in the street as the prisoner's carriage passed. Madeline was defended by John Inglis, one of the most accomplished advocates of the Scottish Bar. The prosecution was led by the Advocate Depute, Donald Mackenzie. Under the rules of the Scottish court as then constituted, the accused was not permitted to take the stand in her own defence, and Madeline sat throughout the 9 days of proceedings in apparent composure, attentive, quiet, declining food and water while in court, holding a small jar of smelling salts, which she was not, by any account, observed to require. The prosecution presented the 3 arsenic purchases, the post-mortem findings, the letters, and the circumstantial evidence of Émile's 3 episodes of illness, each coinciding in time with documented contact between the two. The defence countered with expert testimony regarding the documented cosmetic use of arsenic among women of the period, and with witnesses who stated that Émile had spoken to them of prior suicide attempts and of an almost irrational attachment to Madeline that, in their estimation, rendered self-administration possible. A decisive point for the defence was the timeline itself. Émile had suffered his first acute attack on the night of the 19th of February. Madeline's first recorded purchase of arsenic was the 21st. It could not be established by the prosecution that any meeting had taken place between the two on the night preceding any of the 3 attacks. The diary found among Émile's effects, which contained entries suggesting the dates of meetings, was excluded from evidence on the grounds that its author could not be cross-examined. The jury deliberated for 30 minutes. On the 9th of July, 1857, they returned a verdict of not proven, a verdict unique to Scots law, signifying that guilt had neither been established nor entirely dismissed. Madeline Smith was discharged from the dock that afternoon. She walked from the courthouse a free woman. The newspapers received the verdict with a frenzy of commentary that lasted through the summer and well into the autumn of 1857. The Scotsman, in its leading column, observed that Madeline Smith was either the most fortunate of criminals or the most unfortunate of women. Our other publications were rather less restrained. The case became the subject of broadsheets, pamphlets, and dinner-party argument across Scotland and well into the English counties. It was agreed upon by nearly all who observed proceedings that the truth of what had passed between Madeline Smith and Émile Langelier on the night of the 22nd of March had not been established, and would not be. William Minnoch withdrew his proposal of marriage in the days following the arrest. He did not appear to reconsider the matter. The notoriety of the trial followed Madeline with a persistence that made remaining in Scotland untenable. She left Glasgow and settled in London. In July of 1861 she married George Wardle, a draftsman and the business manager of the artist William Morris, and she resumed a quiet and outwardly unremarkable domestic life. She had 2 children. She and George eventually separated. She did not speak publicly of the trial in any recorded instance during the decades that followed. As the century closed, her name receded somewhat from common knowledge, though it was never entirely forgotten. Authors, playwrights, and journalists returned to her story at intervals throughout the 1880s and 90s, constructing various explanations and attributing to her various states of guilt or innocence according to their own inclinations. None were in a position to know. What became of Madeline in the final chapter of her long life has not been confirmed. The most widely credited account holds that she made her way to New York City in the early years of the 20th century, assuming the name Lena Wardle Sheehy. A death certificate for a woman by that name was recorded in New York in 1928. It gave an age that would have made her approximately 30 years younger than Madeline Smith would have been, and the discrepancy has never been satisfactorily explained. Émile Langelier was buried in the Ramshorn churchyard in Glasgow. His grave marker was plain and made no record of the manner of his dying. The letters, those dozens of intimate letters that he had refused with such resolute finality to return, were read aloud in open court and reprinted at length in the newspapers. They were, in the end, the most public thing about her. Whatever Madeline Hamilton Smith knew of the night Emile came home from Bridge of Allen, she carried with her for the remainder of her years. She took it, undisturbed and intact, wherever she went. And the file, sealed now for nearly 170 years, has never yielded a different answer.